What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we got a Sufjan Stevens top 10 from the years 2015 to right now, the present, when I filmed this in the middle of 2022. Brought to you by our friend, longtime supporter and patron of the channel, Osmond. Thank you, Osmond. I always appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons. If you'd like to support us in any way, check out the Patreon link below, or the Patreon link on the end screen. The patrons make this thing go. We so appreciate them. This is the third one, part 3. Last one, we've done it chronologically. Osmond's put together a fantastic list. Obviously, he knows Sufjan stuff well. He's the one that did almost all of this research. I threw some stuff in on some of the songs, but let's get to Osmond's stuff and the background. Sufjan Stevens is an American singer-songwriter born in Detroit, Michigan in 1975. For his childhood and early part of his career, check out part 1 and 2 of this series. I will link them below. As mentioned in part 1, Sufjan's mother, Carrie, suffered from severe depression, alcoholism, and schizophrenia, and abandoned Sufjan and his siblings when Sufjan was age 1. He then met her sporadically, but his main memories about his mother comes from vacations in Oregon after she married her second husband, Lowell Brahms, who is now head of Sufjan's record label, Asthmatic Kitty Records. These summers in Oregon happened from the time he was 5 until he was 8. Sufjan talked about this in a Pitchfork interview, saying, "She left when I was 1, so I have no memory of her and my father being married. She just wandered off. She felt she wasn't equipped to raise us, so she gave us to our father. It wasn't until I was 5 that Carrie married Lowell. He worked in a bookstore in Eugene, Oregon, and we spent 3 summers out there. That's when we eventually saw our mother the most, but after she and Lowell split up, we didn't have much contact with Carrie. Sometimes she'd be at our grandparents' house and we'd see her during the holidays for a few days. There's the occasional letter here and there. She was off the grid for a while. She was homeless sometimes. She lived in an assisted housing. There was always speculation, too, like where is she? What is she doing? As a kid, of course, I had to construct some kind of narrative, so I've always had a strange relationship to the mythology of Carrie because I had such few lived memories of my experience with her. There's such a discrepancy between my time and relationship with her and my desire to know her and be with her." In 2012, Carrie died of stomach cancer, and this hit Sufjan hard. In the interview with Pitchfork, he said about her death, "She had stomach cancer and it was quite a demise. We flew to see her in the ICU before she died. She was in a lot of pain and on a lot of drugs, but she was aware. It was so terrifying to encounter death and have to reconcile that and express a love for someone so unfamiliar. Her death was so devastating to me because of the vacancy within me. I was trying to gather as much as I could of her in my mind, my memory, my recollections, but I have nothing. It felt unsolvable. There's definitely a deep regret and grief and anger. I went through all the stages of bereavement, but I say, make amends while you can. Take every opportunity to reconcile with those you love or those who've hurt you. It was in our best interest for our mother to abandon us. God bless her for doing that and knowing that she wasn't capable of. And about the way her death hit him, he said, in the moment I was stoic and practical, but in the months following I was manic and frantic and disparaging and angry. They always talk about the science of bereavement, how there is a measurable pattern and cycle of grief. But my experience was lacking in any kind of natural trajectory. It felt really sporadic and convoluted. I would have a period of rigorous emotionless work, and then I would be struck by deep sadness triggered by something really mundane, like a dead pigeon on the subway track. Or my niece would point out polka dotted tights at the playground. I would suffer some kind of cosmic anguish in public. It's weird. I was so emotionally lost and desperate for what I could no longer pursue in regard to my mother. So I was looking for that in other places. At the time, part of me felt that I was possessed by her spirit and that there were certain destructive behaviors that were manifestations of her possession. Oh man, it's so hard to describe what was going on. It's almost like the Force or the Matrix or something. I started to believe that I was genetically, habitually, chemically predisposed to her pattern of destruction. I think a lot of the acting out was rebellion, or maybe it was a way for me to say, this is so effed up, I should probably go into therapy. In lieu of her death, I felt a desire to be with her. So I felt like abusing drugs and alcohol and effing around a lot and becoming reckless and hazardous was my way of being intimate with her. But I quickly learned that you don't have to be incarcerated by suffering, and that in the spirit of the dysfunctional nature of your family, you are an individual in full possession of your life. I came to realize that I wasn't possessed by her or incarcerated by her mental illness. We blame our parents for a lot of stuff, for better or for worse, but it's symbiotic. Parenthood is a profound sacrifice. In order to get some kind of closure, he recorded the album Carrie and Lowell, released in 2015, his most personal and heartbreaking album to date. The album is both about his memories of his mother in Oregon in his childhood and his response to her death and how to cope with grieving a parent you hardly knew. The album uses a lot of imagery from Oregon and is thus often perceived by fans as his Oregon album. After the release of Carrie and Lowell, he toured both North America, Europe, and Australia. And one of these shows was released as a live album and DVD called Carrie and Lowell Live in 2017. Back in 2011, Muscaboo Eindhoven in the Netherlands, commissioned a new work from composer Nico Muller. He in turn invited Sufjan, Bryce Dessner of The National, and the drummer James McAllister to join him. The result became an electronic music song cycle about the solar system named Planetarium. It was premiered live in 2012 and subsequently recorded in the studio in 2013, but was not released before 2017. 2017 also saw the release of the Greatest Gift mixtape. Outtakes, remixes, and demos from Carrie and Lowell, much like the Avalanche back in 2006, was an outtake album from Illinois. This is the Outtakes album from Carrie and Lowell. But since there were fewer outtakes from this record, it also included demos of some of the songs on the album and different remixes of Carrie and Lowell songs. In 2017, Sufjan also wrote a couple of songs to the soundtrack of the movie Call Me By Your Name, and he wrote instrumental piano music for a ballet. This ballet music was released on an album in 2019 and is called The Decalogue. In 2020, he and his stepfather, Lowell Brahms, who Sufjan is close to, released a mostly instrumental collaboration album of new age music called Euphoria, before Sufjan later in the year released the proper follow-up album to Carrie and Lowell, The Ascension. His most popularly influenced album to date, closer in sound to 2010's Age of Odds than to Carrie and Lowell, NPR's Lindsay Zoladz describes the album as, quote, an 80-minute meditation that revisits nearly every one of the grand themes he has explored during his 2-decade career: love, death, faith, desire, place, country, apocalypse, resurrection. I mean, that kind of covers it, right? Just 2 days after the release of The Ascension, Sufjan's father, Richard, whom he didn't have much contact with either, died. Sufjan said in an interview with Pitchfork about his father, well, my siblings and I were raised like tenants, to be honest. There's a total absence of intimacy in my family, though there was still a great deal of camaraderie among the kids. Things were set up almost like a business and it had to be managed that way because we were really poor and there were a lot of mouths to feed. My dad and stepmom never really had consistent careers. They were just always making ends meet. There were rules and regulations and chores, but very little time for casual enjoyment of each other's company. I don't know if any sort of ideological approach to parenting was intentional, but it's a little ironic that my closest fatherly companion is Lowell, a man who has no blood relation. After his father's death, Sufjan recorded a 5-part instrumental synth drone album about the 5 stages of grief in order to process the loss of his father. It was released in 2021 as Convocations. Later in 2021, Sufjan released an album collaborating with Angelo De Augustine called A Beginner's Mind. Sufjan and Angelo were at a cabin in upstate New York, sometimes during the pandemic, watching a movie each day and writing a song based on each movie. The result of this is A Beginner's Mind, which is Sufjan's latest release to date. All right, great background info from Osmond, kind of give us a background of these albums and how they came about. So I'm not going to have the music in the video, but check out the Vimeo link below. You can watch along with me. Going to have the lyrics up. Thanks again, Osmond. And we are not going to start off with the greatest gift, although I've had it down below in the Spotify bar I see, but we're going to start off with something from, it's a video, Should Have Known Better, live from Carrie and Lowell live in 2017. Originally from Carrie and Lowell, but included here in a live version. The song is describing Sufjan's depression following his mother's death, but also gives a bit of hope, like the way he describes the birth of his niece as an illumination in the dark times. In the song, he recalls a memory about his mother leaving him and his siblings in a video store. In an interview with Pitchfork, Sufjan's stepfather, Lowell, had said about the situation. On the album, he mentions being left in a video store that I never heard about before, and I'm pretty certain it did not happen when they were visiting us because I would have heard about it. But I guess it happened somewhere else. Maybe in Detroit, where Stevens grew up. I don't know. So I'm going to have the video up below. Should Have Known Better, live. What a great song. You know, Sufjan has such a softness to his voice, such a unique texture. It's really cool to see live, just the soundscape. I think you're either going to like this kind of music, you're not going to be able to stand it all. I don't think there's any in between, but I really like it. You know, you know what the song's about. Osmond already told us, and you can feel it in there. I should have known better to see what I could see. My black shroud holding down my feelings, a pillar from my enemies. I should have wrote a letter and grieve what I happened to grieve. My black shroud, I never trust my feelings. I waited for the remedy. So talking about he should have tried to make peace with her for himself. When I was 3, maybe 4, he talks about that video store. So, you know, it's said that he visited Oregon when he was between the ages of 5 and 8. So it would have had to have been somebody else. So he just kind of goes in, no, I'm not a go-getter. The demon had a spell on me. My black shroud, captain of my feelings, the only thing I want to believe. I think also not making peace with his mom. Should have known better. Nothing can be changed. The past is still the past. The bridge to nowhere. Should have wrote a letter explaining what I feel. That empty feeling. Don't back down. Concentrate on seeing the breakers in the bar. The neighbors greeting. My brother had a daughter. The beauty that she brings. Illumination. So he's just talking about that. So yeah, I just thought it was a fantastic song to come in at number 10. Now we're up to number 9, The Greatest Gift from the Greatest Gift mixtape, outtakes, remixes, and demos from Carrie and Lowell in 2017. The song is a song of closure after the process of grieving his mother, and he also credits God for helping him through the grief. The Greatest Gift, only a minute 50 seconds, but just, fantastic. Just a little bit of keyboard, the acoustic there, but definitely has biblical stuff all over. Praise the mountains and the rain, all the gifts that still remain. But the greatest gift of all, and the law above all laws, is to love your friends and lovers, to lay your life down for your brothers as you abide in peace. Even use a biblical word of abide, of be with, commune with God. He's everywhere. So your delight will increase. So will your delight increase. As the mystery of the cross, Asa Lovejoy lost the toss, and the fountain in the rain where my sorrow still remains. And he gets that, so I run to my friends and lovers. I lay down my life for my brothers. As I abide in peace, so will my delight increase. Just a fantastic song, talking about how you get closure with death or anyone else. For Sufjan, and for me as a Christian, you turn to God. So even though it's only a minute 50, minute 45, really, fantastic song. Now up to number 8, Lady Macbeth in Chains from the Sufjan Stevens and Angela D'Agostino album, A Beginner's Mind, in 2021. The song is greatly influenced by the film All About Eve, and notably about the character of Margot Channing, as the song is detailing her struggle to adapt to growing past her primetime actress years. All right, I don't know that movie. Let's check it out. Lady Macbeth in Chains. It's a collab with Angelo D'Agostino, and you never know how collabs are going to sound, but it sounds just like a Sufjan song. You just never know it. I mean, it is about that movie. You can open on Broadway, you're a star, just an opportunist at heart, evil hidden glitz and glamour, drunk like a potion harvester. And then the chorus, now the two allegories of pity and terror, one for the money, for trial and error, telling the story, anointing its pleasure, Lady Macbeth in Chains. And then the very last chorus, two categories tell two different stories, one for ambition, one full of glory. Backstabbing feeds on its own inventory. Lady Macbeth in Chains, that dreamy way of the Lady Macbeth in Chains hits is really, really good. Now we're to number 7, Jupiter from the Sufjan Stevens, Nico Muhly, Bryce Dresner, and James McAllister album, Planetarium, in 2017. Jupiter is the second track off of that album, is named after the largest planet in our solar system, which in turn is named after Jupiter, the king of the gods in the Roman mythology. The song draws from both the Roman god Jupiter and the Abrahamic god, both often referred to as father, to characterize the artist's own father and his relationship to the artist. In the song, Sufjan calls Jupiter the loneliest planet. This is explained by him in an interview with Salon. He said, I don't know where the loneliness came from. Well, I think that just comes from Jupiter being the one planet in our solar system that's a potential star. It's a failed star, and therefore it's sort of a quasi-planet. Now, because of its size, its mass, its gravitational pull, it basically keeps us safe. Jupiter, a really well done song, instrumentally fantastic. You got two violins, a cello, a viola. You've got an organ, obviously the guitar, the percussion, James and Sufjan on synths. I mean, you got everything going on here. Obviously drums, Sufjan on the vocals. Thought it sounded really good, and it's great. The lyrics are very complex in the fact that the whole Jupiter and then the God of the Christian Bible, and hearing kind of the interpolating of them, and with his relationship with his own father. So I'm really not even going to go into him, because you start diving into him, and we'll just go down a long, long path. I mean, Father of light, Father of death, give us your wisdom, give us your breath. Summoner says that Jupiter is the loneliest planet. Red right eye put in its place under your foot. Carpenter's cape. So a little reference to Jesus. So that kind of stuff. But, say it with face, say it with force, say it to my face, put me in my place. So that last little part that really pushed into the electronica after the instrumental in there. Sermon of Death says Jupiter is the only conquest. Hurricane Heart, Hurricane Haste, Wandering Star put in its place. So Sermon of Death says Jupiter's the loneliest planet is the way it ends. So just a really well done song all the way around with the arrangement and the vocals and the writing. Now we're to number 6, Cimmerian Shade from that Sufjan and Angelo D'Agostino album, A Beginner's Mind, in 2021. The song is heavily inspired by the film Silence of the Lambs. That one I know, although I haven't seen it forever. Particularly the character of Buffalo Bill, as the song is written from the perspective Buffalo Bill to Jonathan Demme, who directed the film. Angelo said about the song, quote, many authors have emotional attachments to the characters they create, but in this instance, I was interested in how a character felt about being created. In my imagination, I was giving consciousness to someone else's creation. The song is essentially a dialogue between creation and creator that seeks to find understanding to some of the same questions we ask ourselves about existence, free will, fate, purpose, guidance, and if anyone or anything out there is listening or cares. Wow, deep stuff. Cimmerian Shade, also a very good song, soundscape-wise. sounded great. I mean, it is about Silence of the Lambs. So I don't really need to break down the lyrics. I think the chorus is funny. I just want you to love me. I just want to know myself. Fix it all, Jonathan Demme, the creator and maker of the movie. Beauty resides where your spirit dwells. I thought verse 3, save me from everything I ask for, soil from the sod, Lamb of God, rest in peace. I'm still running from the answer, safe in the cell, kiss and tell, my Clarice. So we get back to that, my Clarice. So in the outro, I just want to love myself. I just wanted to love myself is kind of the call and response in there. So a good song, an interesting album to make, right? To write from these perspectives and what he said at the start of how he wrote this song. So let's get to the top half of this list. We have Tonya Harding in D major, because there's some other versions of this, from the single Tonya Harding 2017. This is a long explanation, guys, just because if you don't know anything about Tonya Harding, if you're not of an age where you remember this happening, I'll try to go quick, but you kind of got to understand a little bit about her. A song released only as a single, it's about the former Olympic figure skater who was blamed and accused for the attack on Nancy Kerrigan. In spite of her promising talent, Harding's reputation was shattered as the world responded to the scandal, forcing her into obscurity and ruining her figure skating career. Sufjan had a lot to say about this song. He said, I've been trying to write a Tonya Harding song since I first saw her skate at the U.S. Figure Skating Championships in 1991. She's a complicated subject for some, probably because the hard facts of her life are so strange, disputable, heroic, unprecedented, and indelibly American. She's one of the greatest figure skaters of all time, first American woman to perform a triple axel in an international competition. She was an unlikely skating star, having been raised working class in Portland, because almost all skaters are rich, right? Because it's a rich lifestyle. It's difficult, it costs a lot of money to train, get ice time, all that stuff, travel. Being a poor outsider, her rise to fame in the skating rink was seen by some as a blemish on the sport. It favored sophistication and style. Her skating technique was feisty, fierce, and full of athleticism, and her flamboyant outfits were often handmade by her mother, who was abusive and overbearing, that couldn't afford Vera Wang. And then, of course, the incident where her boyfriend hired somebody to break Nancy Kerrigan's leg so she could beat her. Tonya eventually pleaded guilty to hindering the prosecution, was subsequently banned for life from figure skating. But then her and the guy Jeff Gillooly, they made a sex tape. She had a brief career as a boxer, and she was also very briefly in a band, but they said she was booed off stage. She raced vintage automobiles, setting a record by driving a Ford Model A over 97 miles per hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah. And in 1996, she used mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to revive an 81-year-old woman who collapsed in a bar in Portland while playing video poker. Sufjan says that's a lot to accomplish before the age of 30. And then he just goes on to say how much he admires her because all the stuff she fought, and had come against her, yet she still kind of stood up. She shines, he said, bright in the pantheon of American history simply because she never stopped trying her hardest. She fought classism, sexism, physical abuse, and public rebuke to become an incomparable American legend. I admit early drafts of this song contain more than a few puns, punchlines, and lighthearted jabs. Sex tapes and celebrity boxing make for an interesting narrative arc. But the more I edited and the more I meditated, and the more I consider the wholeness of the person of Tonya Harding, I began to feel a conviction to write something with dignity and grace, to pull back the ridiculous tabloid fodder and take stock of the real story of this strange and magnificent American hero. At the end of the day, Tonya Harding was just an ordinary woman with extraordinary talent and a tireless work ethic who set out to do her very best. She did that and more. I hope the same can be said of us all. Wow, really good, really well said there by Sufjan. Tonya Harding in D major. A really well done song. I mean, that's one thing about Sufjan. He writes about things that you wouldn't think about writing about, right? Writing a song about Tonya Harding. And he just kind of goes through what I talked about in the front. Like, just some Portland white trash who confronted your sorrow like there was no tomorrow while the rest of the world only laughed. And are you lonely at night? Do you miss all the glory, all the mythical story of the Olympian life? Then he talks about Christy Yamaguchi in red, like she ended up winning the gold medal and all that stuff. Has the world had their fun? And they'll make such a hassle, and then they'll build you a castle, then destroy it when they're done. So I thought that was great, man. Just some really good word play there. So fight as on as you are, my American princess. May God bless you with incense. You're my shining American star. Then just repeat shining American star 4 times. So like I said, he'll write about some odd things, but he always makes them sound really good. Now up to song number 4, we have Eugene from Carrie and Lowell in 2015. The song begins with fragments of childhood memories from summers in Eugene, Oregon, where young Sufjan traveled to be with his mother and stepfather, Carrie and Lowell, respectively. It then moves on to Carrie's death and ends with Sufjan singing about his subsequent depression in the present tense. Eugene, a really short one that, could have went on longer for me, but he's just going over those memories and One of the funny parts, the man who taught me to swim, he couldn't quite say my first name. Like a father, he led community water on my head, and he called me Subaru. And now I want to be new. So here we go from swimming lessons, because he's talking about that right before, to maybe getting baptized. Since I was old enough to sleep, I've said it with alarm. Some part of me was lost in your sleeve where you hid your cigarettes. No, I'll never forget. I just want to be near you because she was gone, and he felt that. And it just kind of talks about her death. What's left is only bittersweet for the rest of my life, admitting the best is behind me. Now I'm drunk and afraid, wishing the world would go away. What's the point of singing songs if they'll never even hear you? So you kind of see that depression seep in. A really well-written song. Very sparse instrumentation, so his voice comes to the forefront, as it really does in all this stuff, but very sparse instrumentation on this one. All right, we only got 3 songs left. We got The Ascension from the album The Ascension in 2020. This song is from Sufjan's 8th studio album. In the song, he points out his editorial perspective, which runs through the entire album, to his own naivety, confusion, and selfishness, and believing he could change the crumbling world around him by believing that he was, quote, convocated, sanctified, and blessed for this mission and its consequences. The idea was pointed out by Sufjan in an interview about the album for The Guardian. Stephen said there was a naivety in his former self and in the way he saw the world, but that this has changed with experience and growing older. He also stated that his naiveness is reflected in his previous albums. Experience makes fools of us all, and experiencing so much and growing older, I realized there was definitely a naiveness to my former self. There was a hopefulness, joyfulness, and playfulness to a lot of those early records. It's been slowly receding over the years. I mean, that's too bad to hear as we get older that happens. It's hard for me to speak for it because it's happened so gradually, like watching a tree grow. But you start to lose faith in the structures of society as you get older. And I think that's coming to the surface now. Wow, what a description. The Ascension, what a fantastic song. So well written. And Sufjan does everything on here. Vocals, percussion, synths, drums, piano. Recorded by him, mixed by him, arranged by him, engineered by him. Maybe that's the way the whole album was done, since it was released during the height of, or one of the heights of COVID. The song itself, once again, is quite complex, right? Because it does show his declining faith, not in God, I don't believe, but in people and humanity. When I am dead and the light leaves my breast, nothing to be told, nothing to confess. Let the record show what I couldn't quite confess. For by living for myself, I was living for unrest. Because this world, right, especially in America, where it tells you to live for yourself and be selfish. Then the evidence came back in a chariot of vindication, something to behold, glorious in its path. But the prophecy fell back as it gave to me an invitation. Show them what is right. Show them what is blessed in the course. But now it strikes me far too late again that I was asking far too much of everyone around me. Now it strikes me far too late again that I should answer for myself as the ascension falls on me. And then he just talks about that being selfish, and then verse 2 and verse 3, and now it frightens me, the dreams I possessed. I think I was acting like a believer when I was just angry and depressed. I don't think that he's questioning his faith. He's just realizing that there's multiple layers of what he can do on this earth. And, at the end of the bridge, he's like, I thought I was called in convocation, which is meant called to the clergy. I thought I was sanctified and blessed, but now it strengthens me to know the truth at last, that everything comes from consummation and everything comes with consequence. And I did it all with exultation while you did it all with hopelessness. Yes, I did it all with adoration while you killed it off with all of your holy mess. So he's saying he's still going to heaven, but many people are not. I think that's what he's trying to say there, that I had the best of intentions, but I didn't do it right, which we all go through in life. But the outro, what now, what now, what now? It's a really, really good song. Great choice for number 3. Now up to number 2. It's Mystery of Love, released as a single and on the soundtrack of the movie Call Me By Your Name in 2017. It's one of 2 songs written by Sufjan for the soundtrack of that film. The film's director, Luca Guadagnino, originally commissioned Sufjan to write only 1 song, but he wrote 2 and remixed the piano version of his previous release song, Futile Devices. In January 2018, Mystery of Love was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Song. He performed it at the award ceremony with St. Vincent, got a reaction to her, Sumney, Chris Tile, and frequent collaborators Casey Fobert and James McAllister. The director said in an interview, that I approached Sufjan and told him about the film and navigated him through the ideas I had. It was quite a long process that ended up with him saying that he was happy to do not one song, but two. But he also made us an arrangement of feudal devices for piano, which is beautiful. The song was also featured in the trailer for the film. It is probable that an earlier version of the song was intended for release either on the 2015 album Carrying Lowell or his 2017 mixtape, The Greatest Gift. This is due to the abundant lyrical references to the state of Oregon, the state which became, of course, the dramatic backdrop and focus for Carrying Lowell. But the song also incorporates images from the movie itself. All right, number 2, Mystery of Love. There's no musicianship credits on here, but I that really does sound like a banjo, so it reminds me of his earlier stuff. So breaking down the lyrics is a little difficult because he wrote it for the movie, but I do find there's some bird stuff in here. I'm running like a plover, which I've never heard of a plover, but it's a bird. Blackbird on my shoulder, and Sufjan had something to say about that in 2017 interview with Deadline. He explained the symbolism behind the song's references to birds and why he often uses them for inspiration for his work. He said, quote, "Maybe they're a symbol of freedom, absolute freedom. Sometimes I feel so trapped by gravity. I've always been obsessed with the sacred and with the profound. I think birds are these divine creatures because they can escalate to the heavens. And these physical bodies trapped to the ground, I just feel like we have to reckon with the reality of the world and our mortality. For me, birds feel like symbols of absolute freedom and transcendence," which I'd never actually given that any thought, that the birds are so small and they can go to wherever they want. But the very last chorus, "Oh, woe is me, the last time that you touch me. Oh, will wonders ever cease? Blessed be the mystery of love." So that's kind of what it's about. He kind of breaks things down throughout the song that way. So a good choice for number 2. Sounded really good sonically. Instrumentation nice and dialed back like it has been on most of these. Well, here we go. Drum roll. We're to number 1. You see it below. We got The Only Thing. It's from Carrying Lowell in 2015, which kind of seems appropriate because that's kind of been something that's come throughout this list. In an interview about this album, Sufjan talks about how he felt connected to his mother after she died by replicating her self-destructive behavior, which we talked about at the beginning. In live or death, I felt a desire to be with her, so I felt like abusing drugs and alcohol and effing around a lot. Becoming reckless and hazardous was my way of being intimate with her. And I talked about that at the start, but I think it's good to have in this song. The song touches on his feelings from that time. He goes through a destructive or even suicidal phase, but finds sustaining beauty in religion and nature. All right, number 1 on Ozma Sufjan Stevens' list from 2015 to now, The Only Thing. The Only Thing. What a perfect way to end this top 10 list out. It's heartbreaking to read, right? And I mean, I talked about earlier, and I know Osmond is as well. I'm a Christian, and not only am I a Christian, I taught the Bible for 10 years. So throughout a lot of his lyrics, and this song in particular, you just see allusions to the Bible and Scripture all throughout. And he's just talking about, first one, the only thing that keeps me from driving this car, half light, jackknife into the canyon at night, signs and wonders. Do I survive? Of course, when do I care if I survive this? Bury the dead where they're found in a veil of great surprises. I wonder, did you love me? And also he's struggling with this woman that, he didn't have a relationship with. Then she dies. Then he talks about in an interview, kind of made her a hero. And then he realizes maybe she wasn't a good mother at all. The only thing that keeps me from cutting my arm, signs and wonders, water stain, writing the wall. Daniel's message, talking about Daniel in the Bible, blood on the moon of us all. Should I tear my eyes out now, in allusion to something that Jesus said with hyperbole in the Bible? Everything I see returns to you somehow. Everything I feel returns to you somehow. I want to save you from your sorrow. The only reason why I continue at all, faith and reason, I wasted my life playing dumb. Signs and wonders, sea lion caves in the dark, blind faith, God's grace, nothing else left to impart. So the only reason why he's alive, he believes, is because of God's grace, because he would have maybe killed himself after his mom died because of all the sorrow he feels and conflicting feelings. So deep, deep song. Once again, I think I heard the banjo in there. If it's not the banjo, it's an oddly sounding guitar, to say the least. But it could have just been a guitar, because credit is 2 guitars in here. But either way, fantastic, man. Could be finger picking in there maybe, and that's giving that guitar that sound. Great way to end out not only this list, but the whole trilogy that we've done here. So I'm going to have the same struggle I had on the other 2 lists of coming up with my favorite songs, because this whole list is really good. Honorable mentions: The Greatest Gift and Tanya Harding in D major. Faves are going to be Should Have Known Better, the live version that we saw, the very first thing we saw, the video. Eugene, The Ascension, and this song, The Only Thing. Like I said, I could have said the whole list, but that doesn't really that's kind of an easy way out, even though that's probably true. So got to pick something for you. So thank you to Osmond for bringing this. He did a lot of work, man. He got me all three of these lists at once, did a lot of research on it. Really appreciate you. Appreciate everybody for watching. Please give us a thumbs up and a subscribe if you haven't already. And like I said earlier, check out the Patreon link on the end screen. We would definitely appreciate it. Until next time, guys, I will see you.